Let's go!
From Nintendo and Illumination.
The Super Mario Brothers can take care of the kingdom.
Comes a super-powered adventure. On April 1st.
Pack our things.
The galaxy gets even bigger.
He knows that's my bike, right?
Yes.
The Super Mario Galaxy movie. Rated PG. Only theaters April 1st. Get tickets now.
When you want your spring break to feel like... and your kids' pool day to feel like... and your hotel bed to feel like... ooh, and room service to feel like... because at Hilton, hospitality feels like...
Your cabana's ready. Would you like fresh towels?
It matters where you stay. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay.
It's Deprogram, the podcast where we try to get you into a band or an artist. That's right, we've done all the work for you. All you have to do is push play and listen. And my name is Justin, and this isn't a regular episode of Deprogrammed. And if you've stumbled on this randomly, hi, please hit subscribe. That would be great. We are a podcast where we do indeed try to get people into bands, and I'm band curious is the way I've been pitching this for the last year and a half or so. I'm curious about why people like bands, and we have a discussion about the band and then come together to try to create a top 10 starter kit list for you in case you are like me and have never gotten into the band. So that is what what it usually is. If you've stumbled on this is a daily pod that we're trying to do, just to kind of get into the weeds a little bit on the show and other musical topics and discussions coming soon. But right now you're stuck with just listening to me ramble on for perhaps 10 to 15 minutes. I'm sorry. But today is a Q&A episode because it is Friday. I got a similar question here from both Gavin and their Deprogrammed username is Huzzah. But it's, what are some bands, artists you didn't know anything or hardly anything about prior to doing an episode that have since been on regular rotation or become a favorite? And Gavin's direct question was, has Deprogrammed made you a fan of any bands you didn't know before the show? So, yes. I briefly talked about this on our year one episode. Devo was the first one that did that. It was in that first year, and it was a discovery for me. And I'd never heard Girl You Want. And I was like, oh my God. And, I'm still not a huge Devo fan, but that was the first time I realized that was going to be a thing that was going to happen on this show. That same first year, we did Superdrag. And I wouldn't have called myself a fan of Superdrag before the episode, but I did. I told this on the episode, and I've told it God knows how many times since, that I scooped up In the Valley of Dying Stars in the dollar bin at Warehouse Music, and I loved that record. And then just kind of stopped following the band. Didn't really kind of get into them. So it was an excuse to get into them when we did the episode on them, and it was the first time it was a discovery for all three panel members. As far as I know Jenny's still into Superdrag, but Superdrag is a pretty heavy rotation band for me. Specifically, In the Valley of Dying Stars, of course, and Destination Ursa Major. That song comes in and out of my life frequently, but the record I go back to most of all is the follow-up one, which I'm hoping comes out on vinyl, because they're going to be coming up. They just did Regretfully Yours, so I'm hoping Head Trip in Every Key gets a vinyl repressing, because I would love to have that in my collection. So hopefully that answers that question. I can throw out a couple more here. Jimmy Eat World is one of my favorite bands. And although technically speaking, in the summer and winter between when the show stopped in 2017 and before we came back in 2018, I grew into a Jimmy Eat World fan. So like technically speaking, it wasn't the show, but the show existing is the reason I finally took the dive on Jimmy Eat World, even though I didn't do it for the show, if that makes sense. Paramore, same thing, except I listened to it with purpose for Paramore and have since become a huge Paramore fan. Mets, the most recently, they're pretty constantly in my rotation. And Failure, like if I were to stretch out a top 10 of my bands, those two might sneak in. I'd really have to think about it, but it's pretty flexible from 3 to 10. So it kind of depends on the day. Tired Lion, I don't know whether to attribute that to the show or not. I mean, the show is the reason I dove into the rest of their discography, but I kind of found them before the show and just kind of reached out to try to get other people. Same thing for the Bets. Huge fan of the Bets, but somebody else put me onto the Bets, and then the show was the excuse to dive into the band. So I don't think the Bets really fits the bill of this question. Well, I mean, those are the ones that jump out the most. So, of course, people doing a bunch of bits, because why wouldn't they? Anderson asks, besides the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, are any other artists on the no-fly list? I don't think so. I think those are literally the only ones. I might soften on Zeppelin eventually, maybe, possibly. I don't know that I'm ever going to soften on the Beatles. It's just a hardened point. And then it becomes one of those things where I talked about, I'm going to have people yelling at me that they weren't on the episode. People are going to yell at me that, that I did it wrong. I mean, I don't care as much about that. It's just more so a mindset of you gotta, and Jenny knows what I'm talking about. The whole concept of you gotta. Do I? Please tell us where the theme song comes from. And Anderson asked this, Brian co-signed, and Gavin was curious as well when we did the After the Fact earlier this week. The name of the song is Swarm. The name of the band is Slow Dance. And they were a local band from Your Music Show, and we used to play their EP on the show. And that song specifically, it's an instrumental band, and I'm gonna make sure it's still on Bandcamp, so you can get that song. The name of the song is Swarm. The name of the band is Slow Dance, and it came from doing Your Music Show. That's how I know about it. To answer the question the most directly. Let's see what else we got here. Otto doing a bit. I have a deprogrammed question. I've been listening to the old shows from the beginning. Are you on every single one? I'd like some variety, please. All right. Then I put up the one-off suggestion signups, and let's revisit suggestion sign up. If you would like to get on one of those, jump onto the Discord. All right. And then I think this is our last question for this week. Adam asks some future Q&As. How many countries have been represented in the show? What's the biggest argument or disagreement you can remember happening on the show? What bands have surprised you and have become a part of your own listening now? Do you sometimes have to pretend like an artist for the sake of the show? Okay. So we'll start with how many countries have been represented. You yourself, Adam, and Josh, Ash, Jamie are all from Australia. We've had Canadians, a couple Canadians, I believe. We've had a Scotsman. We've had an Englishman. We've had a Welshman. And of course, most of the people come from the United States that have been on the show. So 6. Andrew's one of the Canadians. And the other Canadian, oh no, slips my mind. No. She did the Tragically Hip episode with us. But most people are American. So what was that? 6, 7 countries represented. I found out recently that somehow China is like really high on our list all of a sudden of people listening. Curious about that. What's the biggest argument or disagreement you can remember happening on the show? So the natural one to go to that I remember that I was a part of was Pour Some Sugar on Me, Def Leppard. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I've explained this ad nauseum on After the Facts because it's come up a lot, but it's never been put into the free feed. What people don't understand about that episode, why I was so testy, was I think Def Leppard was our third episode that day. It may have only been the second, but the knock on me, the punch on me used to always be Justin doesn't like the hits. And that used to be, everybody's argument of why I wouldn't have something. And I kept insisting with Pour Some Sugar on Me, that wasn't the case. It wasn't because it was a hit. It was because there were songs that I liked better by them. And the panel persisted that Pour Some Sugar on Me should be on. And I said, I don't like how it makes me feel. There's so many songs here that I actually do like. And I don't understand why we would put the one that makes me feel weird. Why would that be the one that we're going to bat for here? And I mean, hindsight being 2020, I didn't think of this in the moment, but if they would have just backed off then and waited until it came up in conversation later in the episode, I probably could have been persuaded. But instead, they decided to hound me, and somebody even said, we'll see, dude. And then I said, yeah, we will see. This is my show. We don't do that. So we're not going to do that. And I got mad and yelled a little bit. Again, I was testy because we drove up to Fredericksburg for Alfredo sessions, and we were doing a lot of episodes that day. It doesn't excuse my behavior, but it does explain my behavior. So there's that one. Then the other one was there's three that come to mind here. So there's that one. And then, of course, like the notorious one is Guns N' Roses. Bob put up a fit about Paradise City, like literally as I was wrapping up the show. We were almost done. And Bob goes on a 45-minute tangent of why isn't Paradise City on this episode? And so there's that. That didn't get all heated, but it was we almost doubled the episode because of this one song didn't make our list. And then the most recent one was when we did like the first bit of the Rolling Stones. John and Randy really got in a heated contest about, it was either song 9 or 10, like what was going to round out the list. And neither one wanted to back down. And again, I think we went an additional like 20 to 30 minutes of just them going back and forth between each other, and me trying to find the common ground between them was not great. And it ended up, I don't even remember what it ended up being. Yeah. So that's the most recent that I can think of. What bands have surprised you and have become part of your listening now? I kind of answered that a little bit earlier. I'll throw in, because this question's more specifically asking surprised you, as opposed to what is kind of, technically speaking, Paramore kind of surprised me that I was so into Paramore. Sugar we did earlier like literally just last night as I'm recording this. Sugar really surprised me because they weren't on my radar at all. Mets kind of surprised me. I don't know that I have a new answer, with the surprise element. Maybe you guys can call me out on this. Maybe you remember me doing one that I said specifically. And then, do you sometimes have to pretend to like an artist for the sake of the show? I guess it depends on what you mean by that. I never really fake liking an artist. If I didn't like an artist, I would say. But I think I'm just at a point because of the show that I can like something without loving it, I guess. Like, there's definitely some acts that I ramped up how much I liked them versus what I actually felt about them. I mean, the reality is, I don't want to put negativity out into the world with this show specifically. I never want to yuck anybody's yum, as it were. So I try not to ever come into an episode going, yeah, I didn't like this band. Now there's plenty of bands where, I mentioned this for Pink Floyd specifically, Steely Dan, where I didn't enjoy it wasn't the band that I didn't like. I didn't like how the experience for me doing the show, not the show itself, but like the research up to the show, I didn't like. So Pink Floyd jumps out specifically because I had a miserable time trying to put together my Pink Floyd list, and not for the usual reasons like decision. It's just like, how the hell do you break this up? So it's usually more that than anything. There's a couple bands that I would just never go back to. Alabama's one of those. I mentioned Steely Dan. I'll never go back to Steely Dan, although I probably would like them now. So maybe I can soften on that. There's a handful of bands that we did where it's just like, okay, yeah, it existed. It's not something I loved, and it's also not something I disliked. So there we go. If you have questions that you'd like me to answer, then hop into the Discord and ask away. You can ask anywhere, but the Discord is where it's a little bit more centrally located. So I would appreciate that. Man, sorry guys. I've rambled on for 16 minutes answering your questions. Oops. With that, we'll see you all next week. Goodbye.